everyone. We're going to get started. Good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome you tonight to the Ward 5 City Hall Community Meeting. My name is Victoria McGregor, and I am the coordinator of the City Hall Community Meetings. It's great to see you, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here with us tonight. If this is your first meeting with us, the City Hall meetings are meant to be a gateway meeting between City Hall and Somerville residents. Staff are here and have prepared updates for you on their current work, both in Ward 5 and citywide. Staff are also here tabling on these front tables here. I encourage you to go up and say hello and ask any questions that you may have. After each presentation, we'll take a few questions. If we don't get to your question initially, don't worry. We have scheduled time following all presentations to do additional Q&A. I do want to note that tonight's meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the city website in the coming days. You'll be able to find all City Hall community meeting recordings on the webpage somervillema.gov/community meetings with an S. Now I'd like to welcome up Councillor Gomez-Mucad just to say a quick hello. Councillor?
Oops. Sorry. I'm short. I'll stand on my tippy toes. Hi, I'm Councillor Gomez-Mucad, and I'm here just to listen to the staff and listen to your questions. Feel free to approach me anytime with any questions, thoughts you might have. As we know, Somerville is changing a lot by the second. The other day I'm going down Medford Street and I notice a building is down. We have a lot of changes in our community and a lot of things to do out there because we have a lot of people struggling as well. So again, anything you need, I'm here. So feel free. This is a great opportunity to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Mary, you could go to the next slide, please. Okay, thank you. Before I dive into quick updates for tonight, I just wanted to highlight our City Hall Community Meetings email address. If you prefer email versus asking a question in person, you can email us your feedback, questions, or something you have a question about that isn't covered tonight, and we'll direct your comment to the appropriate department. Printouts of tonight's slides are available in the back corner in the right. If you haven't grabbed them already, I encourage you to do so. There's some great QR codes to kind of for newsletters and other web material that I'll be going over in our quick updates. Next slide. Okay. Earlier this year, Somerville announced its first ever participatory budgeting process, which will allocate $1 million in funds for a variety of city improvement projects. Community members ages 12 and up can now submit ideas for funding online, on the phone by calling 311, and in person at City Hall and at all library branch locations. You can visit somervillema.gov/PB and you'll find an interactive map that has ideas that have already been submitted, and you're welcome to leave additional feedback on those. The deadline to submit an idea is Saturday, May 20th. Applications are also being welcomed to become a budget delegate volunteer. These delegates will go through the ideas and decide which ones will be finalized and put to a vote for residents later this fall. Residents can apply to become a budget delegate at bit.ly/budget delegate app. And the deadline to apply to become a delegate volunteer is Saturday, May 20th. The City of Somerville and the Somerville Arts Council have launched the next phase of their cultural capacity plan, which includes a series of community conversations to discuss how we can help arts and culture thrive in Somerville. Conversations are being led by cultural ambassadors and are organized by interest groups such as music, dance, literary arts, as well as identity groups. Events will continue through May 6th, and you can find the full calendar at somervilleartscouncil.org. And a citywide forum is going to be held on May 23rd at the Armory to learn about themes that have resonated across cultural and interest groups. Just some general election reminders. The table on the left includes several key dates for the upcoming election, including deadlines to apply to vote by mail, tentative early voting dates, and election dates. Now is a great time to review your voting plans and to make sure all information is up to date. One of those key items is, if you haven't already, to fill out the annual city census. Completion of the census keeps you listed as an active voter, which makes for a seamless voting experience while protecting your rights to any veteran bonuses, subsidized housing, or other related benefits. For more information, please visit somervillema.gov/elections. The Elections Department is also taking appointments for those looking to become candidates this year. Next slide, please. The next two slides are just a quick list of recent affordable housing investments. Again, please feel free to grab a copy of the presentation to bring home and dig into those further. Just a quick ARPA update. The city has fully committed all $77.5 million of ARPA funds. Not all allocations have been announced yet, but will be soon. On the next slide, you'll find a list highlighting ARPA investments. If you'd like to learn more, you can visit somervillema.gov/ARPA, which is ARPA. From roadway and sidewalk improvements to sewer and storm drains, efforts to maintain, improve, and modernize our city's infrastructure are underway across the city through our Department of Infrastructure and Asset Management. To highlight projects specific to Ward 5, we have waterline rehabilitation and crosswalk daylighting, or clear corners, which is marking no parking areas adjacent to crosswalks. On Boston Avenue, there will be implementation of accessible curb ramps and partial paving done along Hudson Street. You can visit somervillema.gov/construction to learn about ongoing projects and improvements. On the construction page, you can also sign up for the monthly construction newsletter, which has relaunched as of today. Our first issue went out this afternoon. You can sign up to receive a monthly email that will give updates on work across the city, on that web page. Being here tonight at the Kennedy School, we also wanted to touch on the chiller replacement project. Kennedy School has been using a temporary chiller for cooling assistance since the spring of 2022. The project is currently underway to replace the chiller with a sustainable permanent cooling system. Construction is set to begin this summer, and the new system is expected to be operational by spring of 2024. With that said, what should you expect? Contractors will be on site, with construction hours being between 7 a.m. and 2 p.m. Construction will be taking place in the penthouse and on the rooftop. If you have additional questions on this project, we have staff here, or you can email capitalprojects@somervillema.gov. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. After more than a year of community engagement, research, and analysis, the city has released its first ever citywide bicycle network plan. This is an 88-mile network, including a mixture of protected bike facilities, off-street paths, and traffic-calmed backstreet neighborway routes to be installed over the coming years. Upon publication, Somerville joined Cambridge as the only municipalities in Massachusetts to establish a citywide bicycle network plan. Public engagement processes will be held before installing any facilities identified in the plan, and we encourage you to read through the plan, learn about its development, and to stay informed about any implementation. You can visit somervillema.gov/bike network. We have a mixture of events happening this spring and summer, but I did want to identify two that are coming up rather soon. First up is Porch Fest on Saturday, May 13th with a rain date of May 14th. Those interested in performing have until May 8th to sign up. Spectators can start planning their route by checking the 2023 Porch Fest map, which is being updated as bands register. You can find that on the Somerville Arts Council website. Next, a second event coming up is our Memorial Day Parade on Sunday, May 28th. This is back for the first time since 2016 with a rain date of Monday, May 29th. The parade will step off at noon from Davis Square and proceed west on Holland Street through Teal Square onto Broadway, ending at the Veterans Ceremony, where there will be a ceremony directly following the parade. If you're interested in volunteering or marching alongside Somerville veterans and first responders, I encourage you to contact the Veterans Department at veterans@somervillema.gov. You can also stay in touch with us. We regularly post on 3 main social media feeds, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you use the QR code here, you can also find a list that includes mailing lists and newsletters from various departments, as well as a weekly newsletter made by the city that goes out each week. That's it for me, and now I'd like to welcome to the podium Mayor Tatiana Valentine.
Thank you. Nice to see everyone this evening. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to meet us. What I thought I would do is just ask a few questions so we can all see who's in the room of our neighbors. So I'm going to ask questions like, would you raise your hand if? So would you raise your hand if this is your first City Hall community meeting? Wow, nice, welcome. Thank you for coming. Would you raise your hand if you've lived in Somerville under a year? Welcome. That's Luis. He's our Director of Equity and Strategic Planning in our Office of Strategic Planning and Community Development. Raise your hand if you've lived in Somerville, did I say under 5 years? Okay, under 5 years. Okay. How about under 10 years, raise your hand. Okay. Under 15. Under 20. Under 30? Well, okay. How about over 30? Wonderful. Raise your hand if you've lived here your entire life. Wonderful, thank you. So, if you run a small business here, or any business, raise your hand. Okay, wonderful. If you're a parent of a child in the Somerville Public Schools, raise your hand, or children. Okay. And how about if you all somebody throw out a question that you'd like to know of who's in the audience here? Anybody? Pardon?
If you rent your house.
Okay. If you rent, raise your hand. Okay, great. Thank you. All right. You know, I hear from the community in many ways. I hear from the community through emails, through calls to my office, through meetings like this, and you know, out on the sidewalk having conversations. I also hear indirectly from staff, or excuse me, from residents through like our services on 311. If you look for the first 3.5 months of this year, we had over 17,000 calls. And this gives you a sampling of what they are of the top 5. And we can also get calls that run the gambit from, you know, the service requests to people sharing policy opinions. And I want you to know that what you share directly and indirectly is really important to me, because I'm listening and I take your words seriously. I bring these words and thoughts, ideas to policy meetings, to program planning meetings, and to budget discussions. So tonight, I want to share a look into how we balance all of these different needs, priorities, and requests. So starting out, what's the usual role of municipal government? There's core functions, like for most city and towns, like trash pickup or paving or lights or working on parks. And in some towns and cities, those services stop there. That's because they either believe that that's what their community needs, or because their finances don't allow them to do more. In Somerville, we believe we can and we should do more. And we are continually trying to find creative ways to do that. And the key here is on the creative ways, because not all cities and towns in the Commonwealth and certainly around the country do what we do. So we started off with a strategic plan. So how do we know what we want to do? We had a community process, and we have a strategic plan called Summer Visions 2040. That's why, in addition to the basic services like lighting and trash, we invest in housing programs, climate change action, Vision Zero, or a pollinator action plan, and so much more. I could fill this slide here with so many of the projects until it's absolutely completely full, because we are always aspiring to do more in Somerville. What that means is, at City Hall, that we spend our days focused on both quality core public services and initiatives that invest in the people and in our quality of life and social progress. And we spend a lot of time thinking creatively so we can do more with what we have, not less. That's how we get the depth and breadth of what the city does and has expanded on greatly in these last few years. On this slide, just to give you a 10-year view, 10 years ago, our operating budget was about $185 million. Now it's about $308 million. We had 24 departments 10 years ago. Now we have over 60 departments. We do face, next slide please, we do face challenges to that growth though. We're limited on how we can raise money, so we don't have endless resources. There's a state law called Proposition 2.5, so our operating budget cannot increase more than 2.5% every year, plus new growth. The state aid has been declining in Massachusetts. At the same time, another challenge we have is we have ambitious planning. We are a can-do city, and we're trying to do a lot. So we have multiple once-in-a-generation projects at the same time here, such as Somerville Ave, the high school, which is nearly done. We're almost finishing up on the field, and over in Assembly Row. If you take a look at this slide, with the decline in state aid, we've seen a shift to more reliance on property tax. Back in 2007, 50% of our revenue was from property tax and 30% from the state, but now that's shifted. Fortunately for residents, that includes commercial property tax, which has been growing by design in Somerville. On this next slide, and this is what it looks like. The past 5 years, we've added record property values, which allows the city to fund new programs and services. Notice the orange bars. That's the commercial growth that Somerville, that's our strategic plan, had envisioned when residents got together to chart the path that would allow us to invest in our community. That has now brought us new revenue stream that's allowed us to continue to invest without burdening residents. You don't see this in every community. In fact, Somerville had the third most new growth in the Commonwealth last fiscal year. So the biggest impact we can have on the people who live here now or at this time and place is by bringing new commercial office in designated areas which have been planned over the last 5 to 6 years. This helps us diversify our revenue stream. It also creates jobs for people, and it allows us to do more for our community. How are we overcoming the challenges to do more? We have seized on opportunities for overcoming the challenges, as I mentioned. For one, we've been investing in our community and drawing outside investment. So we're always trying to think creatively, how else can we bring in new revenue to be able to deliver on the values and the ideals and the goals that we put in our strategic plan, and diversify our revenue. So we're also in a good financial position currently because we've carefully managed our revenue. You know, I have to thank our financial staff, our city council, and my predecessor for establishing healthy reserves. We've been able to use these in support of residents and to garner lower borrowing rates. And finally, the biggest thing is we have you all. We have our residents who love to be engaged and who are the brain trust of many ideas that we've implemented. You've helped us think about ideas in terms of infrastructure and social services. And we've also been able to invest in our schools and housing stabilities, and these investments help us uplift everybody in our community. On this next slide, this is a sampling of those investments over the past decade. We now have an Office of Housing Stability, a Department of Racial and Social Justice, Somerville, which is our Office of Immigrant Affairs, all of which have grown recently to meet demand. We have a Fields Maintenance Division, an Office of Emergency Management, separate Buildings and Grounds divisions, divisions of Mobility, Public Space and Urban Forestry, Web Services, and more. And here are some other ways that we're able to deliver on our progressive values, as, you know, trying to figure out the tools out there that we can bring in more revenue. Our community placed linkage and zoning requirements on a range of development projects that automatically build funding or resources for us. They support housing, job training, open space, the arts, and more. We also have inclusionary housing requirements that mandate 20% of all new units in housing with 4 or more units are affordable units. That delivers affordable housing to the community without requiring city funds to be invested. Somerville also aggressively pursues federal, state, private grants. Our state and federal delegation works hard to direct supports for us. And on this next slide are examples of how this is added up in one area, and this is housing. And this has all happened in the last 8 months. So, well, not the, I should say, the affordable housing units that are in the pipeline. I think some of them were permitted, maybe started 2 years ago. But we have over 700 affordable housing units actively in construction and in the pipeline right now. We expect 20 million in housing linkage in the next 4 to 5 years. This past year, we received more than $6.3 million in federal funds for housing, and all of our tools and diversified revenues combined has allowed us to invest $37 million in affordable housing commitments recently. That one was in the last 8 months. So some of these programs are groundbreaking for Somerville, including the municipal voucher program that will provide stability for our most vulnerable renters, and our acquisition fund that will allow the Affordable Housing Trust to jump into the market and compete more easily to buy land or buildings that can be repurposed to affordable housing projects. Not every community can make these kinds of moves. One way our zoning is growing is, with the art space and capacity. So ACE, which is for Arts and Creative Enterprise, set aside, is another interesting tool our community created. I know that the name is a mouthful, it is for me, but what it boils down to is it requires larger developments in certain zoning districts to donate 5% of their new space for arts and creative uses. This is a game changer. We expect that this will put on the market in the next 5 years 530,000 square feet of new arts and creative spaces. This will help artists and makers continue to thrive here and trying to avoid displacement. That's the key. It will also open up a whole lot of new possibilities for arts and cultural opportunities for the public. And this gain was made possible by the city just making some small investments in staff and a change in zoning. So what are some additional strengths that enable us to do more? Our staff. They're our secret weapon. You guys are too. You're all our creative brain trust. And just the willingness and the eagerness to participate, stay engaged, and really share your ideas. We have a lot of staff who are in the audience today, so I'd really like them to stand up at this moment and be recognized. There's a few more here that are running the controls, driving the show here. So I can't tell you how having a dedicated staff are vital to us conceiving and creating and implementing new programs with your community feedback. Another example of creative thinking that stretches our dollar are new paving approaches. And this is moving back to the core services. Here's an example of it. We're working to get more roads repaved using new techniques known as partial paving. By doing this, we can increase the number of streets that we pave. Cambridge is using the same approach. I know some of you are not happy with this method, but it helps us stretch our resources so we can do more. We are still evaluating this approach though, so do feel free to reach out with your thoughts on this. Something else we do to be more efficient and cost effective with paving is coordinating the paving schedule with underground utility work. If we hold on, a bit and slow down and we know what the utility plan is, and where they're going to dig, it shifts some of the costs onto the utilities who are required to repave after they're digging. So our paving budget stretches further. Since I brought up roads, I'm sure potholes are on the minds of many of you. So just as an aside, I'll note, we are working aggressively to patch potholes right now. We usually do a big push in the spring, and as of Monday, DPW has done, over 1,400 potholes in, 3.5 months. The pandemic did slow this work down, but we are well on our way to getting back to our average of 5,000 potholes to fill per year. And an example of staff delivering innovative services is our Rodent Smart Box program. First, the city was out front in hiring a rat czar, otherwise known as our environmental health coordinator, some years back. You may have seen recently that New York City just hired their first rat czar this spring. So I want to ask, Colin is here. Colin Ziegler is our environmental coordinator who is here tonight and launched the phase 1. I think that's the loudest applause tonight, so good job, Colin. A quick update is that it was a success. With over 1,000 captures, and phase 2 of the program has been expanded to Union Square and Lincoln Park. We also continue to explore new methods of rodent control that does not use, and I trip over this word, so beg me, rodenticide? Okay. And how to make them available to the public through the residential assistance program, which also is an unusual but effective approach. You won't find a residential program like this in most communities, but we found if you invest in helping private properties where rodents are active, it can help the whole neighborhood. We've had 273 requests for the residential assistance this year through the end of March. Meanwhile, we are exploring the expansion of rodent control focused positions in the coming budget season. Another core service area we have been focused on is legacy infrastructure challenges. We have an aging water and sewer system under our streets and numerous old buildings that are really in need of significant repair. And we have a network of roads originally built for cars, not for people on foot or on bike, who need to be also kept safe. Somerville is not alone in needing to catch up. Like much of the country, our infrastructure and buildings have suffered for decades from underinvestment and deferred maintenance. This administration, my administration, is committed to breaking this mold of underinvestment in renovation, repair, and deferred maintenance. But it will take time, strong fiscal management to right this ship. So we are working with purpose to tackle these issues through thoughtful and sustained investment and planning. We cannot only look backwards at our legacy challenges. There is a new layer to any infrastructure update, which is our commitment to sustainability. We now must include planning for climate resiliency and impact in our investments. Reducing flooding impacts through gray and green infrastructure, for example, is essential to keeping and helping protect our homes and our businesses. We are taking on this monumental challenge via two core approaches: strategic planning and investment, and a new approach to maintenance. On the planning side, we recently have undertaken a comprehensive effort to carefully chart our new investments in our schools, our firehouses, our below-ground services, city buildings, and more. To explore that plan, you can visit our website, somervillema.gov/CIP. CIP stands for Capital Investment Plan. While we tackle the problems of the past and plan for the future, the city, however, is also taking a thoughtful and innovative look at how to make much-needed improvements right now. We know that major renovations, construction projects take time. We need city infrastructure to serve the public safely while work is planned and completed. So our capital projects team is currently stress testing equipment and assessing vulnerabilities, starting in our schools. Somerville has not been doing this for the past 20 years. We started this within the last 8-9 months. We are committed to increasing the systems and monitoring and figuring out the replacements. This is just a quick list of infrastructure projects currently underway or in active development, planning, or review. The Somerville Ave Utility and Streetscape Improvement Project, Spring Hill Sewer Separation, Somerville Ave Poplar Street Pump Station, Powder House Boulevard and Alewife Brook Parkway intersection, Pearl Street reconstruction underway. We just submitted letters of intent to the Massachusetts School Building Authority for the Brown and the Winter Hill schools to begin the process of either renovation or rebuilding. We also just released a bike network plan, which was mentioned earlier, which accelerates investments in Vision Zero infrastructure. And finally, there's the Highland Ave sewer separation streetscape design. But as we do this core service work, investing in physical resources, I want to close with a brief overview of the additional work that we are doing in Somerville to invest in our people. We have upped the climate action plan and we launched an update to this plan this week. Last year's budget had a historic 10% increase for schools, which was very important to me, and it is now in use serving our youth in multiple ways. We've issued a comprehensive community survey to inform our ADA planning. We've developed new protocols and opened our first ever emergency overnight warming center for our unhoused population this winter. We expanded staffing for LGBTQ+, language justice, racial and social justice, and in-person outreach in the community. And we pushed out funds to small businesses to help them recover from the pandemic. We are ready to open a day center for our unhoused persons. We are preparing to launch a universal basic income pilot. We're moving towards opening Massachusetts' first supervised consumption site to prevent overdoses. We're launching a new gender wage gap effort to take on the wage disparities that hold low-income women and their families down. We supported strategic planning for the Women's Commission, and we are launching a strategic planning for multilingual services as well. So with that, I thank you very much for listening, and I can take a couple of questions now, and then I'll be here until the last person leaves, and we can take more questions at the end of the program during the Q&A. Yeah, sure. So Victoria will be coming around with the microphone so everybody can hear the questions.
At the last Board 5 meeting was November, I believe.
Okay. Yes, it was in the fall. Yes.
I spoke to you about the hazardous waste.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. I spoke about the hazardous waste.
Yes.
Collection.
Yes.
Stall.
Yes.
and you got it done. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I see that it's in place now as a permanent thing again. It was very important to me. I met with not a lot of cooperation from the department in charge of it or from my elected officials. But when I brought it to you, you got it done. And so I say thank you.
Thank you. I think he has another question.
Well, it's someone that gets something done, you know. When I was at this last meeting, one of your staff, I believe the gentleman in the blue tie, announced with some fanfare about the Somerville residents' preference on the job sites in Union Square throughout the city, that there was some sort of an agreement. I asked him after that meeting about that agreement, that he had got up and said what a great agreement they had. He said that he didn't really have information about that agreement. Okay, I said, he said, I'll need a couple of days to go back. I said, take 2 weeks. You just want to know what the agreement says. I've heard about it, but I don't know what it means. That was back in October. Not after 2 days, not after 2 weeks, not after 2 months, not after voicemails have I heard a response.
So if this is the constituent services that
It's so great in our city. Not so much so.
Okay, so you want an update? Tom, can you add? Thank you.
I guess it was probably me who spoke.
Yeah.
I didn't hear quite your question, so if you could just repeat it so I can hear it.
Did you get out of the meeting and talk about the agreement for local Somerville residents on work as such as in the city?
We have resources that help.
Did you get out and announce that in the last meeting?
I don't know if I did that.
Did you?
Yeah.
Nobody.
So what I would,
What I talked about is that we have a workforce development team who focuses on connecting people to jobs, local jobs. And we do have relationships with all the big projects that happen in the city. So we have definitely a system.
Specifically appropriate. It's in the minutes of the meeting. I don't.
so what I would ask is maybe Victoria, if you could get the gentleman's contact, let's make sure we get him the specific answer that he wants.
It was about some of the residents being given preference on some of the construction. And there's a list. The list is down in Union Square. I signed the list, but the list has no force. The painters somehow have a giant pig inflated in Union Square protesting that this agreement is being honored. Nobody knows anything. It's been many months since I brought this up. And so I hope that magically, that's just wasted. You'll fix it.
Okay. Victoria, if you could get the gentleman's contact information. Thank you. So we have time for one more question now, so the next person can speak, and we, again, we'll have Q&A later. Oh. To take more questions.
This is a question about the rats. I've lived in Somerville for over 40 years, but we didn't have rats until a few years ago, and now we have rats, which is quite an experience. I'm wondering, I appreciate the boxes and I appreciate what's being done and the rats are and all that, but I'm wondering if there could be a public education program about making sure that the lids on garbage cans are down, even on recycling bins, because I think there are very few people who wash their recycling the way my husband does, so we can eat out of it. And we see the rats running around our street when we take the dog out at 11 o'clock. And when I take them out at 2 o'clock, it's a little scary. So can something be done about that? Because I think we can all participate in helping.
Thank you. Colin, could you answer that, please?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
That's a great question. So currently, what I can do is I can set up a community site visit with you. So I can meet with you and your neighbors, we'll neighborhood, we identify certain issues, and then we provide just general information about road prevention. We're also looking to road-specific community meetings later this summer, and we'll format those and get the word out, get out them as soon as possible. So look forward to meeting you all there, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to pass on, I think Denise, you're up next. And again, I will be here for the whole evening, and we'll have a Q&A at the end of all the speaking program.
Thank you, Mayor. Before Director Melina Capers starts her presentation, I did forget a quick announcement. The city's anti-displacement task force is looking for volunteers. Applications are due this Friday, April 28th. The anti-displacement task force will equitably consider the needs of the community, provide a space for an exchange of information, and a range of other other measures. Luis is here. If you're interested in applying, if you want to learn more, please feel free to go over and chat with Luis, or you can call 311. And I also did want to acknowledge that school committee member, Laura Patone, is here, so thank you, Laura. And with that, I will turn it over to Director Melina Capers. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Good evening, everyone. Buenas noches. You actually met the real director of the RSJ department, who was taken out to the playground to do some work. So I am representing him right now. I will keep this quick because, as usual, the RSJ department has lots to share. And I want to be able to give everyone a moment to ask questions or share thoughts if they have them. So we have finalized and closed the Public Safety for All survey, and I'm very excited to note that the PSFA survey has received one of the highest response rates in Somerville's surveying history and is one of the most representative surveys Somerville has ever conducted. And I have to say and give honor where honor is due to my RSJ team, who worked really hard in putting together, putting to life our strategic plan to do community outreach. And our outreach was very intentional, and that's what led to that, that happening. So we closed it a few weeks ago, and we are now in the analysis stage of the results. We've been coordinating heavily with Somerset, and I would like to share with you very quickly the top 5 concerns citywide regarding public safety. So number 1 was people violating traffic rules or traffic safety. Number 2 is theft and burglaries, including car theft, shoplifting, stealing packages, bike theft, and pickpocketing. Number 3, housing security. Number 4, gun violence. Number 5, illegal drug activity. Now, we also asked specifically for each ward. So for Ward 5, the top 5 concerns were: number 1, people violating traffic rules and traffic safety. Number 2, theft and burglaries. Number 3, housing security. Number 4, gun violence. And number 5, illegal drug activity. So this is just a preview of some of the results that we have from the PSFA study. Again, we are still in the analysis phase, and we will be sharing that with the community at large. And speaking of which, the committees that will be receiving the final analysis is the PSFA task force, which is in its final steps of us choosing members of constituents who applied to be part of the task force. And the final stages of that is doing the background and reference checks. And in the next few weeks, we will convene the task force so that they can begin training and orientation for their work that's ahead of them. I'm also excited to share that this week, the Civilian Oversight Task Force met for the first time. It consists of 14 members. of subject matter experts, constituents, Somerville service providers, and their focus, again, is on defining and creating recommendations for what a sustainable civilian oversight board would look like in Somerville. And this includes putting together what the powers, duties, authority, composition, and more would be for this particular civilian oversight board for the city of Somerville. So both task forces will be working and engaging the community. There will be opportunities hosted by the task forces themselves for the community to engage with them and to share their perspectives on the work that they are doing. The Anti-Violence Working Group is a new working group that we have started, and importantly, the application, we extended the deadline. It was originally April 28th. We are extending it to May 19th. And the group is going to be working with experts from the nationally known Urban Peace Institutes to develop policies and initiatives that will address violent crimes in the city, specifically gun, gang, and domestic violence. Part of the importance of this work, again, is something that the RSJ department values, and that's capturing the lived experiences and the unique needs and challenges of our constituents and the particular neighborhoods that they live in Somerville. As we know, these issues are not issues that can be solved in a cookie cutter way, and so solutions for them needs to include bringing in the broad voices of Somerville and the experiences and meeting the needs of the different constituents. Am I on the right one? Okay, yeah. So our youth cabinet, the RSJ Youth League has concluded their study, and they will be presenting at Harvard's Graduate School of Education CPAR program about their research on how displacement and gentrification is affecting youth in Somerville. This presentation will happen next week, but I am also excited to say that our department is planning to host a Somerville community event so that they are able to share their work. And lastly, their research will also include working with the RSJ department to define and implement a permanent seat at the table and launch a long-term RSJ Youth Cabinet. The Youth League was a one-year program, and the Youth Cabinet is a program that will be established after the Youth League is done and will be a permanent group where they will be able to report out on what is happening with youth in the city and the effects of their lived experiences within the city, and they will be able to affect change through policy, programming, and recommendations. Commissions, all three commissions have open seats, and this spring and summer you will see more communication from our department on how you are able to apply for membership. The recruitment will remain open until the seats are filled. In closing, I want to say again that we are recruiting still for the Anti-Violence Working Group. Adrian Pomeroy, our ADA coordinator, is here with the ADA survey. So I welcome all of you to please walk over to the table, grab some of the paper materials that can give you more information, fill out the ADA survey. There's also QR codes if you prefer to do it that way. And we also have a brochure that gives you more information on the Anti-Violence Working Group. And so with that, are there any questions? The Anti-Violence Working Group will be working specifically around gun, gang, and domestic violence in the city. Absolutely.
Any other questions for Denise? Thank you, Denise.
Thank you, everyone.
Good evening. I'm just going to turn this a little bit so I can take a look at that. My name is Charlie Femino. I'm serving as the interim police chief for the past 2.5 years. I see a lot of familiar faces many of you who I've known throughout the years I've been on the department, as well as being here last October. I recognize a few faces, and I've spoken to a few people earlier. So what we usually do is give a snapshot of citywide crime and any trends that are happening, and then we switch into Ward 5 specific crime, and then we have a couple of topics of interest. Before I start, I just want to say that building on what Denise Molina-Capers was talking about, we have been working closely together since the day she started. We meet almost every week on a weekly basis to discuss and to provide a framework as to what we'll be doing in the future for policing in Somerville. So a lot of the work that she's talking about, a lot of the task force that she mentioned, we're directly involved with also, and we support them. Specifically, slide please. Citywide crime is up 7% over 1 year and almost 20% over a 2-year period. In the past 12 months, we've seen the highest rise in crime seen in the last 5 years. Now, when I talk percentages, just to make it clear, sometimes that's deceiving and people think that those are large numbers. What it equates to with the 7% is about 79 incidents over the past year and about 200 incidents over the past 2 years. Most of that increase in both years 1 and 2 are relevant to property crime and very small amounts of increase in violent crime against persons. So we're seeing a lot of car breaks, a lot of thefts of parts of motor vehicles, specifically catalytic converters, airbags. In Ward 5 particularly, seeing a lot of car breaks. When you look at Ward 5 specifically, again, the same type of trend. Crime trends are up about 19%, which equates to about 18 incidents over 1 year, and 27% or 23 incidents over 2 years. Again, the same elevation is basically due to property crimes with a slight increase in aggravated assaults in Ward 5, but most of our biggest increase in Ward 5 were the car breaks. And so, with that being said, one would ask, or one thinks about, well, what do we do about that? So one of the things that we do at the police department, we have a crime analyst, a crime analysis unit, and that person, a senior crime analyst and an assistant, monitors these crimes and what's happening in the city on a daily basis. They put together crime bulletins or informational bulletins, and those are forwarded to our patrol officers as they start their shift, so that they then are aware of what's happening in their particular wards that they're assigned to, so that they can spend more time in those particular areas during their shift. Another concept that we put into play, which has been around for a while, is the Park, Walk, and Talk program. When that was first started years ago, it was more or less to get out and engage in the community in a positive manner, to talk to the residents, to talk to business owners. And more recently, over the last couple of years, we've also added to that a dimension where we're going out to try to engage in the community, engage with the youth in the community, and find out from them, and a lot of times we'll garner information of what's happening in a particular area, as well as imparting upon them what's happening in the area, so that if they see suspicious activity in any way, shape, or form, they are reminded to call the police department. Next slide. I know that the gun violence is a topic in a lot of people's mind. We had a community meeting not too long ago, and this is a reiteration of some of the information that we put out in that community meeting. From January 2020 to present, we've had 49 confirmed shots fired. During those 49 incidents, there were 325 rounds fired. 12 individuals have sustained injuries. But once again, these incidents are going to happen. What we have done during that time period of 2020 to present, with our criminal investigations unit, in collaboration with other jurisdictions at the local, state, and federal level, have been able to identify, locate, and charge 30 individuals for these shooting incidents that have occurred in Somerville. And that doesn't count incidents that may have happened in other jurisdictions. That's specific to Somerville. A lot of times these incidents are interjurisdictional, and they're involved in other jurisdictions as well as Somerville. Altogether, from 2020, we've seized 40 illegally possessed firearms during those incidents. And we've begun, in collaboration with the Racial and Social Justice Department, we're trying to get involved with the youth at an earlier age. We've set up a couple of basketball camps down the Mystic Development area. We've also been doing dialogue sessions, so with hopes of trying to get to these individuals, these kids that are at that age, to prevent them from becoming or getting involved in affiliated with gang members in these shooting incidents. Next slide. Domestic violence and sexual assaults. Citywide, there were 39 fewer incidents of domestic violence reported in 2022 compared to 2021, and 6 more incidents compared to 2020. We changed a little bit from last night, if anyone was paying attention. We were trying to compare April to April. It's a lot simpler to keep track, so we changed, as of this meeting, calendar year. I'm not going to read everything on this slide, but what I do want to bring out when talking about domestic violence is that we're coming off a peak, and we have seen a decrease over the last several years. We have a very strong, what I would consider a strong family services unit comprised of detectives who are specially trained not only in domestic violence issues but in certification for rape investigations. So, I would urge that if someone felt that they either were personally or know someone who's been involved with domestic violence that needs assistance or any type of an assault, they can contact our family services unit. They can do it anonymously. There's phone numbers at the end of the slide presentation that they'll be able to take down. And we also have handouts with those mental health, substance abuse, and domestic violence resources in 3 different languages at the back of the room. So at the end of the meeting, you can pick one of those up and bring them home with you. But just keep in mind that, based on reporting the incident doesn't mean you have to go forward with the process in the court. The mere request for assistance would provide that assistance, and it doesn't have to go any further than that. We work closely with the district attorney's office, and so I think that I would urge you to pick up one of those resources packets at the end of the meeting if you feel that that's important to you. And with that, I'll take a couple of questions now, but we'll be here. I'm with Captain Donovan. Captain Donovan is our patrol captain. He's in charge of patrol officers who are assigned to the patrol division. Usually when an incident or a request for service comes in, regardless of where it comes from, I usually direct it to him. He's like the eyes and the ears of not only the ward counselors, but for the residents in Somerville, so that if there's specific services, he provides that. Any questions? So the question is what most of these firearms are, whether they're handguns or whether they're rifles. Is that the question? Or assault weapons. Thus far, they've been handguns. Yeah.
We have a question in the back here.
Hi there. Thank you for this presentation. I'm wondering if you have any data or plans about traffic enforcement. I feel like walking around just chaos out there.
Well, when I walk around and I'm driving through the city of Somerville, sometimes I feel the same way, so you're not alone. We do provide traffic enforcement, but I'll say a couple of things on traffic enforcement. We've had to, since 2020, we've reduced our traffic enforcement efforts, primarily due to the pandemic era because of transmission issues, and that was a directive coming from, I believe, the state level and at the local level. So we're just really coming out over the last, say, 12 to 18 months of that era where we really reduced our level of traffic enforcement. But secondly, I've been always of the opinion, and we've tried to have the philosophy that traffic enforcement is not meant to be punitive. So although you might not think that we're doing traffic enforcement, we do write a lot of warnings for individuals, and we also have some grant monies that we're trying to obtain to do not just motor vehicle traffic enforcement, but pedestrian and cyclist enforcement and education. Education is much more effective than punitive enforcement. But we do have traffic enforcement. Unfortunately, our traffic unit has been diminished in size. We at one point had 5 or 6 or 7 officers, and now we have, I think, to reassign it because of staffing issues. We've had to reassign some officers back to the patrol division. But even within the patrol division does do and is responsible for traffic enforcement and traffic education. I'll be here at the end. Okay, I'll take one more. Okay.
Do you have cameras on any of the crosswalks, like Magoon Square crosswalk? It's very dangerous, especially at rush hour. Do you have cameras on the crosswalks?
I do not believe we have traffic enforcement cameras. We're looking into that concept, both at our department level and at the city council level. There's been some discussion about that, but I don't believe it's come to fruition yet.
All right, good evening, everyone. I am Sarah Lewis, the Director of Planning, Preservation, and Zoning. I will be brief. I have one slide. It is actually good news, and this is a call to all of you for assistance. We were lucky enough to be awarded a grant from the Department of Housing and Community Development at the state level to study Broadway, right between Magoon Square and Ball Square. It is basically where the Medford line cuts off a lot of the parcels on the north side of Broadway, which hampers redevelopment. Now, given everything else that's going on in the city, we want to make sure that this is, Broadway's an important corridor. So we want to make sure that we can understand how that can develop most effectively. We are partnered with the City of Medford on this project. Right now, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work taking place to get this set up. So we're collecting base mapping from both jurisdictions. We're making sure that we have the scope of work correct for when we ask consultants to come in and help set up the community process. So please, please, please stay tuned and come participate when we get this project going, because we will need your input to understand how we move forward. So thank you.
Any questions for Sarah?
Sarah, when this is, when you start a public process, where can residents find this information?
When we are ready to go, we will make a big splash. You will be the first to know. We will hopefully set up a page. Hopefully you are all familiar with the Summer Voice page, where you can track a lot of the ongoing projects in the city. So we'll set up a Summer Voice page, but we will do a big announcement and make sure that we get the word out.
Thank you, Sarah.
Good evening. I am Louisa Oliveira, and I'm the Director of Public Space and Urban Forestry. We do trees and parks. And trees and parks are very important because trees and parks are infrastructure. In fact, a tree is a piece of infrastructure that appreciates in value as it ages. And this is particularly important right now because trees and parks create climate resiliency. So you'll see on this slide some examples of that. The tree canopy, which we've been working very hard to increase, very important in the face of climate change, as well as a lot of the working landscapes that when you go to a park, you don't know that they're there. So these are Caltech chambers at Lincoln Park, and that because it is an area that gets a lot of flooding, when there's a severe rain event, that water is being infiltrated into these chambers and holding that water. That's a type of green infrastructure. And you are just playing on top of it, so you have no idea that this is happening. Same at Conway Park and a number of other parks. And then this last slide is, again, a way that parks are infrastructure. We have, as the mayor mentioned, embarked on creating a pollinator action plan, which is a way to minimize habitat in the city. And this is the first one that has happened in a city as dense as ours. So we very much try to look at parks and open space as infrastructure, and it is becoming more and more important. Which leads us to the next slide, that we all want more of it. And we hear this all the time. Everybody wants more trees, everybody wants more open space, and so do we. We presently plant 350 street trees per year. When I started working here about 10 years ago, we barely planted 50. And there was a lot of conversation about how there was no spaces to plant 50. Well, it turns out that's not true, and our tree team, we call them the Tree Amigos, there's 3 of them now, they plant 350 street trees. And then in addition, we also plant trees when we renovate parks. So last year we planted 509 trees, which is a nice amount. But trees also need to be cared for. So everybody says plant, 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 but it's very important to also think about maintenance in both parks and trees. And then in terms of open space, everybody wants more open space. It was something that has come up consistently in all of our long range planning. And we initially with Summer Vision, the community identified 125 acres of new open space. Then in the reboot of Summer Vision, it was brought down to 105. Since 2010, we have gotten almost 21 acres, and that is by extending parks where we can and acquiring parcels of land to build parks on. Those things don't happen often. The acquisition doesn't happen very often. But what is very promising is that we potentially are expecting to get a lot of money through a lot of parks, money too actually, but a lot of parks and open space through development. And we work very closely with developers to make sure that they are producing the types of parks that feel very open to everyone, and that they're not making what we like to call latte parks, so that you feel like I have to go in, buy a latte to feel welcome there. So we work very closely with developers to do that. Our team is 7 people, landscape architects and arborists, and I just want to review a couple of the projects that are happening in your ward. There's really technically only one, and that's Somerville Junction Park. Hard to see this slide, but Somerville Junction is adjacent to the community path, and it's a passive park. In the community meetings, we heard that people wanted it to be a place to rest, and so it is going to be just that. It's really a quite beautiful plan with a lot of plants, as well as a bike fixing station and an area to get water and to kind of take a break along the community path. We are presently vetting the bids that we got and are hoping to be in construction within the next couple of months, pending the MBTA getting out of our way. So we're very optimistic about that. And then the last one that I'll mention is the Brown Schoolyard, which is going into construction this summer and will be done. We're pushing very hard to have it done in the span of the summer when the kids are not there. For obvious reasons, it's much easier than when they are there. So that's what I've got. Any questions? Everybody always has questions for me.
Can you explain the status of the bike path and why it is or is not yet open?
I wish that I could, but I know someone who can, and he's up next. So there's just a reminder that the bike path is MBTA property, so it's not actually something that we can control.
I was just trying to, this Junction Park, where is it?
Junction Park is between Central and Lowell. Is that right? So right now there is a park there. It was an old railroad junction. I'm trying to, does anybody think of any distinguishing things that you would know where? Across the railroad tracks from the foam factory.
We have a question back here. Hi, thank you. I want to know what kind of trees that you have been set planting on the sidewalks in Somerville. I had a tree, a very healthy tree, that fell on my car in August, and I did request to have another tree, and I did see some markings, but I'd like to know what trees you are planning to put in. I've seen some beautiful trees that have like white flowers that seem to be around Somerville, but I want to be sure that whatever is there is going to not fall on my car again, and is going to be pretty healthy. Now, I don't water the trees. People aren't watering the trees, but we went through that drought, and the tree just was healthy. It fell on the car. So I'm just curious as to what we're going to be putting in.
So every time the arborists are going to plant a tree, they're looking at which species works in that location. And remember that street trees are surviving in the harshest of conditions. They've got 3x3 compacted soils, no nutrients. So, and then add overhead wires and the things that are happening underneath the surface. So each of the sites has a tree selected for them. If you email trees@somervillema.gov, you can ask Vanessa, our arborist, to tell you which tree she has planned to put there. And yes, if ever you see those green gator bags, you can fill them with water. You can't water them too much, especially in times of drought. We're always asking people to help with that. And that leaves Brad.
Good evening, everybody. How's that volume? Okay. Stay away from that one. Don't want feedback. Hi, my name is Brad Rawson. I'm a Somerville resident, and I serve this great city as Director of Mobility in Mayor Ballantyne's office. I'm also a proud parent of a student in the amazing Somerville Public Schools. I see so many familiar faces. I'm a 15-year veteran of this organization and this community. And so for those of you who we know, thank you for staying engaged. It's great to see you. I'm so glad that we're doing face-to-face meetings again. For all those folks who raised their hand for first-timers, welcome. Thanks for taking a risk. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to be here. Civics matters. Most communities don't do this kind of stuff. And if you give up, if you get discouraged, some of what makes Somerville so special starts to erode, right, Mayor? We had answered that question just last night. How do we preserve what's great about this place? It's about people power. I'm going to have a couple of quick little slides, and then my first question answered will be about the community path. Okay. So, we are part of the Mayor's Office of Strategic Planning and Community Development, and since we're running ahead of schedule, let me just quickly paint a picture. 75 people, amazing people, altruistic people, trained people work in that department. 25 of them literally are affordable housing specialists. Our housing director, Mike Filoni, was here earlier. Mike might still be here. Mike, awesome. Louisa leads a team, as she said, arborists, parks planners, landscape architects. Sarah leads a team of architects, planners, regulatory, and historic preservation specialists. We have small business specialists, workforce development specialists. The team that I'm responsible for is the transportation group. We do lots of community engagement. We do lots of project development, and then we usually hand things off for construction purposes to our partners in our engineering division, which is led by the incredible Brian Postlethwaite, who's standing over there. He serves as Director of Engineering. I'm going to talk about the two main themes of what our team does, so it's just 2 slides, and then we'll get to those questions. The first one, the first part of the mission, nobody should get run over in this community. Denise Molina-Capers mentioned that as we think about public safety for all, one common theme that we hear from across the city is that people feel uncomfortable, they feel scared, they feel threatened as they walk, as they drive, as they try to catch the bus, as they try to ride a bike. So one of my team's primary objectives is to do everything in our power to make sure that people are not hit by speeding motorists. There was a question earlier today about enforcement. I think we all observe that people have lost their minds in these last terrible few years of the pandemic. Driving behaviors are worse than they have ever been. Aggressive driving, high-level speeding. This is why we build speed humps. This is why we build raised crosswalks, raised intersections. This is why we build curb extensions and make these little choke points. It's why we install protected bike facilities. Somerville didn't make this stuff up. It is international national and regional best practice, and it saves lives. We've buried 6 of our neighbors in my tenure. People who've been hit by speeding motorists as they just try to cross the street. It's unacceptable. No community should say that this is okay. Here are a couple of resources that you can plug into if you want to get involved. Louisa talked about how everybody wants more trees and more parks in their neighborhoods. I've been doing this a long time. My neighbors, our residents, they say the same thing about traffic calming. We want more safe streets in our neighborhood. We have an interactive map that is shown on your slides. There's a link there. You can zoom in and zoom out, and you can use it to organize your neighbors and to advocate. A couple of years ago, we used to build only about 5 traffic calming locations per year. Under Mayor Ballantyne's leadership and with great participation from community members and other departments like Brian's, we did 55 last year. Enforcement can be helpful. Education can be helpul. There's no substitute for changing the built environment and making it physically impossible for somebody to drive 40 miles an hour on Powderhouse Boulevard. When my kid goes to public school, one of our neighbors was killed in a crosswalk 4 years ago. There's just no substitute. You gotta build those speed humps. You gotta build those raised crosswalks. The second way to stay plugged in, whether it's on the day-to-day construction or the long-term planning, is a monthly newsletter that my little group publishes. It's so cool. We've got about 1,500 subscribers. We really take this seriously, trying to get the content out to you all every month. Often, it's a little bit like this meeting. It's like the doorway to getting involved in community meetings, design development processes. So when we're getting ready to repave a street, when we're getting ready to try to make buses run on time, folks can get plugged in and they can know how to fill out surveys, how to visit tabling events, how to go to community meetings, advocate, and also be aware if there are impacts. Sometimes there are impacts, and we try to be very honest about them and upfront and balance needs. So that's one side of our portfolio. Next slide, please. The second part is to fully and rapidly decarbonize transportation in this city. We're in a climate crisis, folks. 40% of our carbon footprint comes from the tailpipes of our motor vehicles. Driving is not evil. It is not inherently evil. I don't want anybody in this room feeling like we are demonizing or denigrating people who need to use a car to get around. We all have different stages of life, small business, family, age, ability. These things matter. The automobile has too much of a footprint. It's too dirty. We have to decarbonize quickly. Electric vehicles will help. But you know what helps more? Building the Green Line, helping our buses run on time, and the thing that we want to advertise tonight, putting free transit passes in our residents' pockets. When Mayor Ballantyne came into office 15 months ago, one of the first things she asked our office to do was to quickly scale up assistance programs. We knew that the cost of transit was a barrier for a lot of people, younger folks, older adults, people of low income. If you or anybody that you know fits into any of these categories, please email transportation@somervillema.gov and we will connect you with resources. We've been coming and tabling in the public schools, we've been in public parks and bus stops. We have more resources than we have subscribers so far. Every student in the public schools, grades 7 through 12, free transit pass. All buses are free, all subways are free for 1 year. Every member of the Somerville Public Schools workforce is offered a free transit pass. This is an incredible thing that helps us attract and retain great educators who are doing such hard work, particularly during the pandemic. If you're a parent or guardian of a student in the public schools, you can qualify for a free transit pass. If you're a low-income resident unaffiliated with the public schools, we got a different pipeline for that, working with our anti-poverty agency, the Community Action Agency of Somerville CAS. So this is just a little bit of a referral form for you all. So 2 kind of quick little summaries of the types of work that your transportation, your mobility division is working on every day. So with that, let me quickly take a couple of questions. And the first one is an obvious one that everybody wants to know. We do too. So the community path is not yet open. Parts of it look like it's ready to open, but it's not. We are so frustrated. I am so desperate to be walking and to be biking and to be giving more of our residents another way to experience this amazing springtime. But the MBTA's contractor has not yet finished work. And just because something looks complete, or even just because somebody's pushed the fence aside at Willoughby, doesn't mean that it's complete yet. There could be drainage structures that actually are not set at the final elevation. And so the first big rainstorm, we're gonna get ponding. And in the wintertime, we're gonna get icing. The MBTA has an obligation to go fix that before their contractor walks away. Stuff like that occurs all over the corridor. Our staff have been out walking the blocks. The mayor has asked us to kind of transition from a gentle diplomatic advocacy to more of a sharper, hard-edged advocacy with the team to be like, come on, it's springtime. We've got to get this path open. So the good news is MBTA's contractors out there right now. We expect an end of spring. They'll be ready to open. So hang in there. I want to kick the fences down. I want to go on a protest march with you, Mayor, with all of our residents who have lived through such awful construction impacts. They're so frustrated. Please don't go out there with the wire cutters. It's just not a good idea. The city is actually going to manage this path in the long term. Our DPW crews will be taking care of the landscape. Our first responders will be responding to emergency calls. There's liability stuff here in play that might come back to haunt us 5 or 10 years from now if the MBTA's contractor walks off the job or passes the buck to us. So please, just hang in there for another month or two. I hope that's a helpful summary of the issues.
Is the part of the community path by Maxwell Green, the yellow surface that's deteriorating, is that MBTA control? Can you remind them that that surface is falling apart? And while they're there, maybe they can fix it?
So the question was about the older path extension. Remember a few years ago, 2015 or so, we extended from Cedar Street to Lowell Street out back of Maxwell's Green. And some of those rubber safety surfaces seem to be showing their age. I know exactly what you're talking about. That is not part of the MBTA's community path extension project, different contractor. So if those are maintenance activities, that's actually on the city. Call 311, please. I can't guarantee we can do anything about it this year, but that helps us track, helps us organize the resources for next year and beyond. Okay, thanks.
Go back to the first row.
Yes, please.
Hi, Sam. Asking the same question I had in November about traffic calming on Medford Street in front of Winter Hill School. To the point of education, do you think we can prioritize some traffic calming in front of the Winter Hill School at Sycamore and Medford because people continue to run that light?
Yes, thank you, Sam. Thank you, Sam. So if folks could not hear, the question was about traffic calming at the Winter Hill Community School on Medford Street itself. Sam, as you know, and others probably know, we built a bunch of speed humps on Sycamore. So Sycamore is better than it had been. We actually did the intersection reconstruction about 3 years ago, right, Brian? So we kind of narrowed up and extended some of the curbs. And yet, on the main line of Medford Street, you're right, there's too much red light running, too high of speeds. It is on our watch list. It's not going to happen this year. Our dance card for where we're building these things this year, and probably next year as well. But the year after that, yeah, I bet we can get there for sure. And if there's an opportunity for us to do it sooner, we will. One more question, and then I will be, like the mayor said, we're not long out of here until the last person has their last question answered. Thank you for your time. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm wondering how you collect data on the non-fatal but dangerous things. So, for example, I was hit on my bike. I was okay. It was very dangerous, but it wasn't something I felt like I should report to police. But it made me think that it was a dangerous situation. So how are you gathering data like that?
Thank you for the question. I'm just going to repeat it real quick. So the question was, how can you report things that either are not crashes, maybe they're near misses, or maybe they're crashes that don't feel like a big deal? I'm so sorry that you were hit by a driver on your bicycle. That's terrible and that's unacceptable. Kind of like I said a second ago with 311, please do report those sorts of things. Our police department collates those data. They send it off to the state publishes it in public dashboards, and our staff are constantly monitoring those data sources. And we use that to help organize and prioritize investments. We want to know where crashes have occurred. In terms of near misses, we're doing a couple of different things to explore technology. 311 still helps if you say, oh my gosh, I get jumped back out of a crosswalk. We're looking at camera options and those sorts of things to identify near misses. But please, if you see something, say something. And if you've been in a crash, it's worth reporting because you may not know it, but maybe you have an injury. You need to protect your interests in the long term. We always advise people to report crashes. Okay, so I'll be around. Thanks for your tolerance. Thanks for coming out, and keep the faith. This community is great. It's because of you. It's because of our elected leadership.
I'm getting into our general Q&A portion of the meeting, so if you do have questions for Brad, so feel free to raise your hand, but I just want you to know that you can ask anything.
So Brad, sorry to bother you again, but at the intersection of Glenwood Road and Medford, the street light has been out since February. Talk about dangerous intersection. It's dangerous for me when I try to drive through it. It's dangerous for me when I try to cross the street there because it's dark and no one can see me. I reported it to 311 in February. It's still marked as in progress. So I'm doing that.
Okay. I will help escalate. I will help identify. And again, we're meeting constantly. I have a meeting tomorrow with DPW, including with the Lights and Lines group. The mayor talked about how old our infrastructure is. We have so many cases like this. People are running around constantly, but we'll make sure that this is bumping up the list.
Questions for the mayor?
Or for any of the department heads. Just ask your question and the department heads will come up and answer. Hi.
One question about the strategy. I'm definitely all for keeping bikes safe.
Okay. You know what, Brad? This is going to be for you. So no, it's okay. So you just need to be able to hear it. Okay.
I'm all for keeping bicycles safe. And I was just wondering if you're exploring some different strategies besides those white poles, the plastic poles, because the UPS guy takes them out right after the dawn, and then they're plowing them at like 9 o'clock in the morning. And knocking snowbanks that I've carefully created back into the sidewalk, and then I potentially need a ticket for that. So mainly I'm thinking about winter time, and whether or not there's any other strategies. I know it's a very difficult.
Thank you very much. The question was about those little plastic poles that we often use for traffic calming, for protected bike lanes. And the question is about, are there alternatives? The short answer is yes, there are, and we're moving in that direction. Folks may know that Cambridge is using little concrete wheel stops, they call them. It's a little bit like a shopping mall parking lot. They're more stable. They offer better protection. And I think maybe they can be a little more aesthetically pleasing too. Quick question was about plowing. Our DPW has a standard small vehicle. It's about 5 feet wide, so we try to never have less than 5 feet on those things to go to clear. Sorry, third time's a charm. Now I understand your question. DPW does the big plow on the street, and sometimes it plows into the bike lane. Then they're supposed to bring the small vehicle, and often they end up trucking stuff out, but it's a work in progress. This is a relatively new evolution. They're hiring more people, they're getting more contractors, and buying specialized equipment. And each year, the expectation is what you described will happen less frequently. So I hope that's a decent answer, that we got good people working hard to minimize that hardship on you. Yeah. Right, but then they actually do trucking and removal. They'll bring the dump trucks in, they'll scoop them up, they'll get that snow out of there. That's the best case scenario.
Over here.
What's happening with public safety? I last understood is the city has taken over some of the land from apartment buildings that were there and now compromising the trees and the birds around that area. So I just wondered where that is.
Sure. So thanks for the question. I will say that when I came on board, I asked the city or the staff to put pencils down to have more community process. The program that is supposed to happen at that site is a public safety building which houses Engine 3 and the police headquarters, which are currently sort of on the other side of McGrath in Union Square, and other programming. It could be affordable housing, it can be ground floor commercial, it's what the community wanted. So now the question is, what does that look like and how does it fit on that site? So there was an RFP that went out there that we got some applicants that were interested in it, in trying to figure out what are the next steps, what is the building type that needs to go there. But right now, it's sort of deciding. There's a community, what do they call it? A CAC, community advisory. Thank you. Oh, Melissa, you're here. So Melissa can give more detailed information on this, but Community Advisory Committee, which is going through and interviewing the developers who are interested in helping us figure out how to program that site. And that's probably going to take about a year. Or Melissa, do you want to add any more to that? Thank you.
Sorry, I know you never interrupt the mayor. Hi, everybody. I'm Melissa Woods. I'm the Director of Capital Projects, and Capital Projects is partnered with Economic Development and Office of Strategic Planning and Community Development Department to deliver 90 Washington Street. The goal is a public safety building and other development sought by the community, and there's a lot of interest in restoring the neighborhood services that used to exist in that part of East Somerville and Innerbelt. Like the mayor said, after an extensive community process, we have heard from the community about their interest in the site and released an RFP to bring on qualified development partners to help us reimagine 90 Washington Street to deliver that project to the community. The CAC is currently evaluating those responses, and there will be continued meetings about 90 Washington Street, particularly through the Citizen Advisory Committee. If you're interested in that project, I'm happy to talk more about it, and you can find us on Somerville's Summer Voice webpage, summervoice.com/90 Washington Street. Thank you.
Just a quick question. All the improvements on the ball square with the new landscape and everything. The one I saw is that solar sign. I know it's a landmark. Are there any plans to fix it or do something with it?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you. Is there any plans to fix which sign in Ball Square?
Toady sign.
Toady?
Yeah, it's an old sign over, like used to be a sub shop. The sign is broken. It's a nice store.
So usually, I mean, I don't know the particulars to that site. I would just ask that Victoria gets your information. We can get back to you. I would say that if something's on private property and it's not city property, we can see what tools we can use to, encourage safety around that.
Like I said, I know it's been declared landmark, which prohibits the
So I don't know the details, but I'm happy to have my staff look into it. Unless there's anybody here from the staff that has that answer? No, so we'll have to dig a little. Thank you for the question. Okay. Any more questions? Okay.
Yeah, it's just a general question that goes to affordable housing. Is someone moving in the direction of rent control?
So thanks for the question. The city has put in a home rule petition. That means that we ask the state for permission to implement things. State law prohibits that now. So we can't move forward on anything or have discussions on it, or implement any ordinances until the state gives us permission. So, asking your state rep and our state senator, what's the latest on movement up at the State House is another avenue to go.
Madam Mayor, this is a public meeting, and tell me why the zoning meeting is public. In other words, the zoning meetings are, if there's a development in your neighborhood, you have to go on a Zoom meeting. But to meet you, you get to talk to you, and it seems like safe here as far as Somerville. So is there a reason why the zoning meeting, you can't attend this person? Is that helpful for the citizens?
So thanks for the question. Having a meeting on Zoom is considered a public meeting. I think the data has shown that we've had more engagement when we've offered the ability to have the meetings on Zoom. There's been increased participation. After that, I don't know if Sarah is over there. We can talk to her more specifically if there are any, if there's a plan on doing hybrid or moving some of these back into in-person meetings.
For instance, this isn't a Zoom meeting. Would it have more people attending if it was a Zoom meeting?
So what we're doing, we are going to have a Zoom meeting. So we're having 7 ward meetings, then a language-specific Portuguese meeting, a language-specific Spanish meeting, and we are doing a Zoom meeting also. So in the past, there have been 7 meetings. This time around, we're going to have 10 meetings.
I appreciate the public meetings I attend, but I also would like to be involved in the zoning process as it affects me as a neighbor. And I find that the Zoom meetings were not very
helpful.
Exactly. Because if you just came on those Zoom meetings and say anything and leave the meeting, there's no chance of discussion. It doesn't seem like there should be any disparity between a public meeting with the mayor and a public meeting on zoning that affects the neighborhood.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. What I guess I'd like to know is, Victoria, if you can get information on the exact project, and I can figure out whether it's actually a community meeting that's hosted through the city councilor, or if we're actually talking about a zoning board of appeals known as a ZBA meeting.
Or involvement. If they can attend a Zoom meeting, they should be able to attend an investment. I just don't understand why it's Zoom. What's the reason? What's the need for it? If Zoom is a better way to meet, then we would be meeting it in the public. Or maybe we should be meeting it.
Well, okay. I really appreciate your feedback. If these are ward-specific meetings that the counselor holds, I guess I would say it's, as we're transitioning out of COVID, that you can talk to your ward counselor and ask them, can you have a meeting in person now? If this is about development, usually the development meetings are with the ward counselor hosting and the developer there. So as we've transitioned out, it's really up to the ward counselor, I guess, and how their plans are, whether they're doing them in person or whether they're doing them on Zoom. So we don't necessarily, the city does not necessarily host those meetings. It's the developer who's the one that is managing and hosting that meeting, because they're trying to come to the community and say, hey, we want this development. So they're asking you to get behind something. It is not, those development, or those types of development meetings are not managed through government. It's the requirement of the person who, the property owner, to do that. Again, that's if I understand you on the community, you're talking about your neighborhood development. But I can talk to you more about it. I can see if Counselor, offline. Okay. Any more? No? Okay. Good. Welcome. You have to put it closer to your mouth. Yeah, really close.
So I have a question for you.
You have to keep the mic.
The open space.
Yeah.
So I live on Hilton Street, and so a couple of years ago, actually about 2015, there was a property that they wanted to develop on the corner of Somerville and Richardson Street. It was put up to a vote, and the neighborhood voted. It was required for Somerville Engineering Corporation to develop right behind the current house, and the other half of the property, which is right on the corner of Somerville and Richardson, was going to an open space which is currently has 7 trees. Have been there my whole life. So I was actually wondering, so at some point over the years, the house was put up for sale, we had a meeting in the neighborhood. And so at the end that they want to build now, knock down the 7 trees, at least this was a year ago, and build 2 affordable housing units, and then just about half of the property or less would be for open space. I was wondering what the current plan is. I mean, given that there are more than 700 affordable housing units in construction or in the pipeline and everything, is there any way to save that green space, given that there isn't really much open space in that neighborhood?
Yes. Sarah, do you want to answer that? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for nodding. I didn't see you, so I appreciate it.
So this is the property, we refer to it as 3500 lots. So yes, the cottage, the existing home is done. They have a SEC as the current owner of that property. They do have a lot split to separate the open space from the affordable housing lot. We are working with them currently to get a proposal together for those affordable housing units. So it is still planning on going ahead. We're just working through the details of how that comes to fruition.
So is there any way to save it just for the whole open space, not for affordable housing units, as was the initial promise to the neighborhood when it was acquired? And it was acquired by Somerville Engineering Corporation as a result of the neighborhood getting together. So, I mean, given that, through grants or something, so nothing gets built there, because at the moment, 7 trees that are there will be completely knocked down to the, and there will be no, I understand that you would have to plant 70 trees and then you have space that would become available, but ideally, personally, I would like nothing to be built in that space. And I'm pretty sure that most of our neighborhood districts as well. And as I said, it was acquired through a neighborhood vote, and so it kind of feels like a betrayal that turns around and wants to build on top of it.
Okay, understood. I wasn't considered a lot of this, I inherited, but I will look into the backstory of what happened here. And so I don't mean to alarm you with what I know of the current process, but I'll find out the backstory and reach out to it.
So one more question?
Sorry, just to be quick.
It's okay.
The Somerville letter.
The what?
The Somerville Community Newsletter. The email that goes out, I really appreciate that. I believe that the city uses Constant Contact. Is in that newsletter, you have enabled click tracking, which means that I can't click on any of the links in the newsletter without disabling my ad blocker. It's kind of annoying. I don't think I should have to allow ads in order to see these links. I would just ask you to evaluate whether that's really necessary, or if there's an alternative, or post the newsletter on the website. That would be great.
Thank you. We'll certainly look into it. Or do you have an answer? Okay, great. Thank you for that. Anything? There's a gentleman over here.
Hello?
Hi.
There's been some discussion in the community that large buildings of 7 or more units in an apartment building have different policies for trash fines. Is that true? And if so, is there anything we could do to change that?
We will have to get back to you, just if I have my former counselor hat on. I believe that if you have 4 or more units, you can apply for a permit and pay. Instead of having your own trash picked up, you can get a permit and pay the fee and have the city pick up your trash. This 7 number, I'm not sure more than any of that, so I think it's better that we just get your contact information. Because your question is 7 units and more, right?
It's in the city municipal laws.
Okay. I just don't know the answer to it, so I have to look at it. I'm happy to get back to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate you coming. I appreciate you listening to us all, and I hope you have a great evening.
Effectively conveys the message that a lot of good stuff is going on. Do a lot of passionate things. If it's one recommendation,